All right, so this is it. We've come to, this is the last session of F8, right? We made it. This is it. So I like to think that everything was leading up to this moment. So Zuck opened for us. This is the second year we've had a design track here at F8, and really excited that we were able to share and show Origami Studio. We're going to show a little bit more of that right now. So I'm going to ask George and Kat to come up and talk a little bit about how we design and prototype at Facebook. We're going to run you through a hypothetical app so you can see some of our process and some of the tools that we use and how we work at Facebook Design. George, Kat, come on out.
Hi everyone, I'm Kat, and I'm a product designer on marketplaces here at Facebook.
I'm George, I'm a product designer on mentions and live video.
And we're really excited to talk to you guys about designing and prototyping at Facebook.
Yeah, we're super excited to give you guys kind of a peek at how we usually approach problems here at Facebook. How many designers do we have in the room? A good number? Okay, cool. So for all of you designers, hopefully you'll pick up some tips or tricks that you can bring back to your own team to work more cohesively and more consistently. And for you non-designers, hopefully you'll kind of get a better understanding of what the design process is like here at Facebook, and you'll kind of just know what designers do a little more than just make cool stuff on a screen. A little caveat, though, about design processes in general, right? They're not scientific. They change a lot. Sometimes you spend a lot of time on one step. Sometimes you skip some steps. So don't take this as like exactly how you do this, but this is just how we usually approach things at Facebook.
And for you non-designers in the room who might be feeling like this when you hear the term product design, let's get some basics out of the way. What is product design? Product design is a hybrid between design and strategy. Product designers are here to help you identify, investigate, and validate the problem, and then ultimately craft, design, and ship the solution.
So now that you kind of have an idea of what product design is, just hypothetically, we have this app that we've built. It's called Facebook To-Dos. And it's not a real app, but for the purposes of this presentation, it is. It's really cool. You can log in with Facebook. You get your to-do list synced across all your devices. You can check some stuff off, like did get breakfast this morning. I called my mom. I did get my groceries, so that's good. And we can add a new to-do really quick. What we're doing, we're speaking at F8 today, right? So we should do that for sure. So it's really cool, but it's pretty basic, right? Some may consider this like an MVP or a version 0. And a lot of people are using it hypothetically, right? And they really like it. So now we're at the phase where we want to add some really cool new stuff to this. And we could add anything, right? So how do we start, Kat? Where do we go from here?
Well, George, a lot of people think that this is where the design process starts, a blank sketch screen or whatever design tool you're using to start mocking stuff up. Actually, it's one of the most terrifying screens for a designer. At Facebook, we spend a lot of time planning before we ever get to this phase. We spend a lot of time defining the problem first. And for us, that means gathering tons of data and research, existing and new. And this really helps us answer, what should we build? Why are we doing this? What do people even want or need? It's very important because it helps us understand our users before we really dive into design.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important part here, right? Is like, we want to understand what people want to use. Sometimes we make things and we think they're really intuitive and like really smart, but we give them to someone and they kind of feel like this, right? They have no idea what to do with it. They're super confused. And that's just the biggest bummer, right? Because the last thing we want to do is we don't want to make something that is just confusing and people don't understand, right? So research helps to ground us and make sure we're not designing in a vacuum.
So for our hypothetical app, we've already taken it through this research data phase. We've integrated Facebook Analytics into it, wink, wink. And so we've had some initial data to look at. And we noticed that 50% of tasks being created had a person's name in the title. We thought that was pretty interesting, so we conducted some in-person interviews. And these are some of the common themes that surfaced. Things like, I want to send a task to a friend, can I tag my boyfriend in it? And research like this is super helpful because it lets us set goals to know what success will look like further down the road. So for us, we can say, cool, we're going to add this friend tagging feature, and if more people are using that than just writing in a person's name, we're pretty successful. At Facebook, though, we don't just listen to a few voices. We take in a lot of different opinions and perspectives and then synthesize that down to find the right solutions for everyone. For example, if we listen to this particular user, who wants to tag her boyfriend, we could just build her a tag my boyfriend button and call it a day.
I don't think I would use that.
Really wouldn't help a lot of you or George. So we're going to build something for our widespread users, tagging a friend.
Right. So now that we know what we're building, right, we have this feature described that we want to implement. We don't jump into design yet. We're not designing anything first. We want to actually do some whiteboarding. And whiteboarding is awesome because it allows us to explore a ton of options really, really quickly. So for example, take a look at the screen. A couple circles and a plus sign. This is like an add a task screen, right? And this would maybe take you 30 seconds if you got the circles really, really round. But you kind of get the gist of what this screen's going to do, right? Whereas compared to the designed version of the screen, you could spend tons of time thinking about color and type and iconography and effects. Should it have a blur? Who knows, right? But the time difference there is huge, right? We could have done like 100 of these screens in the amount of time it took us to do one. So whiteboarding lets us see a lot of options very quickly and see which one makes sense.
Yeah, this ideation phase is really important here at Facebook. Like Julie Zhu, our VP of Product Design, has said recently, if you have literally tried every possible variation, you will have come across the best solution. And at Facebook, we really do believe that good design comes from brute force.
Right, so that's what we did. We filled an entire wall full of ideas. We sketched until our arms went numb. And we took a step back after we got done sketching all these different ideas out, and we saw three possible solutions that looked like they could have some potential. We've got this dense list view, we've got one with some pictures, and this grid view. And honestly, all of these seems like they could solve our problem really well. So I think it's time to kind of take them to the next step and see them in a little higher fidelity. So do you want to get started, Kat?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Let's start our design demo. Cool, so at Facebook, we're pretty much torn between Sketch and Photoshop. I'm a Sketch person myself. And here we go. We have our main home screen for the To-Do app, and this list view here with one of our events, planning Ron's birthday party. So what we're going to do is sketch out, mock up some, 3 different versions that we saw in the previous whiteboarding phase. But where do we start, right? If you can ask any designer in this room, they'll tell you that literally thousands of decisions go into every design. So at Facebook, how do we make sure that we're communicating those decisions to every stakeholder, every teammate, without spending all of our time doing that? Well, we rally around basic design principles. And I've written some out here for our fake app. Pretty simple stuff. Humanized, we want it to be very people-centric, and systematic, meaning let's make this the opposite of someone's busy day, right? They'll get into our app and they'll feel really good, it'll be organized. And what that means for UI is that now we can speak around that in terms of these principles that everyone can follow. So this turns into recognizable patterns. We're probably not going to throw crazy GIFs and animations at you when you're in our app. We want it to be very structured. We want lots of clean lines, lots of grids. And then when we're talking about this later with our team, everyone's starting from the same kind of point of view. So I've already gone in and designed the first version, that kind of list view, pretty basic, not super interesting, not super easy to scan. This version 2, that's a little bit more interesting, has a profile picture in there, and it's a little bit more lofty, but still not super interesting. So we're going to go in and build a third version. So something that we do at Facebook that's pretty interesting, and I think Monte talked a little bit about this, was we have reusable components, and we call that the Facebook Interface Guidelines, the FIG. And it's super helpful because we're not reinventing the wheel every time we go to design a new problem. So things like flyouts and buttons are already pre-designed, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about them, but now that's kind of there and ready for us to use whenever we're approaching new problems. And I've kind of made this fake interface guidelines for our app here, and pulled out some of the things that we'll need for version 3. So let's start putting this together. We need a title, something like, friends in this task. You should definitely consult your content strategist if you have one. Put in a search bar so we can find our friends, and we'll start building this kind of big human-centric way for us to find our friends with this little add button. And that's starting to feel pretty good. So make this a grid. Boom. Now we can put this guy in there, and as we can see, it's a little bit better, more interesting than these guys up here. Kind of like that. We already have in our TIG, this pre-made button, but it's not full width. But since we already have it kind of made, we know what it should look like. We know how to keep it on brand. And within like a few seconds, we can just make a brand new button. And there you go. And now we're ready for the prototyping phase, really.
Give it up for Kat. How's that?
So first, I know that we're known at Facebook for this move fast and break things mantra. But if we don't follow just a basic set of standards and processes, then we're actually moving slower and getting distracted with non-essential problems. We're about 200 product designers working on one core app. And like you saw, we don't waste time reinventing common UI patterns or paradigms unless they're at least 2 times better and absolutely necessary. And this is important for 3 reasons. First, we want the best behavior to be standard across all of our users and all of the products and features that we're launching. 2, we want to eliminate unintentional inconsistencies that make Facebook feel poorly put together, even though the individual designs may look great. And 3, we want to make it trivial to go from design specs to components so that when engineers and designers are talking to each other, they're speaking the same language. But we know that not every team is the size of Facebook's and have this size, or teams dedicated to making things consistent. But there's still definitely things that you can do within your own team.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, we can't all have teams that are focused on making us consistent, or people like Mate and Andrew and the design tools team who are making awesome things to make our life better. You can't have that at every company. So here are just some basic things that I think can help a lot of design teams kind of work a little better. Number 1 is just have a style guide, especially if you don't have a style guide, make one. Start small, pick some colors, pick some typefaces, and get them in a document and stick to it. And you'll find that as you use this over time and you keep adding to it, you'll have more creative energy to spend on the cool, unique parts of what you're building, rather than oh, I need a button, what color should it be? And then from there, you can go into making reusable components, right? Take a holistic view at your app and see what starts to feel repetitive or what you find yourself using a lot. Pull those out and make really strong guidelines around why and where it should be used. And then you'll have these awesome building blocks. Like you saw Kat, she was able to make that screen in 5 minutes, and she moved super quickly, feels on brand, it feels cohesive, and it feels like it makes sense in the context of the product. The bonus part of that, right, is that if you're using these components that are pre-built, engineering becomes a lot quicker because you're using things that you've already made once. And then lastly, just communicate. I think this is something that's overlooked a lot of times, but the only way you're going to stay on sync is if you're talking to each other. Have regular design syncs, talk with the design team, be open and be able to share work that might not be done yet. And the sooner you can get more eyes on something, the better it's going to end up being. So I think we have a great mock-up there. That's awesome. I think it's time to prototype it. And I know Mate just did a great job explaining why you should prototype. But in case anyone's new, just to reiterate, prototyping is awesome and really important because it lets us feel how something's going to be without actually building it, right? We can put it in our hands, we can put it in our users' hands, and understand if we're chasing the right solution. There's a lot of ways you can prototype. We do all of these here at Facebook. You can start with a paper or static mockup, right? You can make a paper version of your app and move some screens around, and you'll be surprised how easily you can get the point across. From there, you can move up to something like Keynote or InVision and make some flows with some static or basic transition animations and start to get things moving and feeling out how they're going to work. Or you can go up into the high fidelity end of the spectrum like Framer or Origami and make something that actually behaves and feels real, like a real app. And you can't tell the difference between it and what's shipped. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do some origami prototyping in the awesome brand new Origami Studio. So let's do the demo. All right. So we've got this awesome comp here, and actually cooking show style, there's a pre-assembled one off the side of the screen here, so that's handy. I'm going to minimize this for a second, and I've already got a basic prototype here kind of set up. We can tap on this task and get a detail view. And from here, we can open up the drawer, but it's missing some things, obviously. But we've got the basics of it kind of put together. So I'm just going to switch back to Sketch and grab this grid view, because we need to put that in our drawer. And all I have to do is just copy it. And I can use Origami's awesome layer panel to paste this right in this drawer. And it's automatically going to work how you would think it would work. It's already in the drawer. And I can just come in here and nudge it down a little bit. And yeah, that looks pretty good. So now what do we need to happen next? We want to simulate what happens when you're selecting a person, right? And since this is a prototype, it doesn't have to be 100% realistic. It can be a little bit scripted, but still feel really real. So we're going to add a counter, and we're going to hook that up to the tap on this grid. So when we connect this here, you can see this number goes up as we tap that. So that's great. That's how we will be able to tell how many people we've selected. From there, we can just add a little bit of logic to know if we've tapped maybe one person or two people. And now I'm missing something here. I need a check mark. So let's hop back to Sketch, and we'll go over here. And there he is, hanging out. And let's paste this in, and we'll just position it, move it down. And it's really easy. It's so nice to be able to just come in here and nudge these and see the output in real time. So we'll set JB up to be picked, and then we'll also have Megan be picked over here. So we've got our check marks in place. And now to animate those, all we need to do is publish out the scale parameter for each of these. And we'll position those. And then we want to, have some transition here, so we can add a basic pop animation. And pop animation is a great part of origami that makes these really, really nice bouncy transitions. So we'll add a couple of those, and we'll reset our counter real quick. And now when we dismiss this, we'll come back, and let's just see if this works. So we'll tap on here first, and up there Megan got picked, and we'll tap on JB, and he got picked. So that's awesome. We're really close now, but there's one thing we're missing. The tray doesn't update to show that we picked someone else. So let's add that in, and we can do most of this with some math. We'll go and find this plus button, because we want to move this over as you've picked more people. So we'll get that, and we'll do a little bit of math here. We want to know its initial position. So we've got that plugged in, and then we'll do some multiplication. See, designers do math. And we'll plug this in, and then let's just finagle this. I'm not sure exactly how much. I think that's kind of right. I need to hop back to Sketch, though, and grab those other two people. So we'll grab Megan, and we'll put her here. And let's just nudge her up a little bit. And over. That looks pretty good. And then let's grab JB, and we'll paste him. Do the same thing. And perfect. So let's go back and let's start this from the beginning and make sure that we've done it right. Oops, I forgot to turn those people off. So they should be hidden initially, and that's really easy also. We just publish out this enable, which toggles if they're visible or not. And we can reuse this logic that we put here to turn those on or off. So now when we start from the beginning, we tap in here, and we have no people selected. We can hit this plus and select some people and come back. And there is our trays updated. So this is awesome. This is a great prototype to have for our process. So there's a little demo of Origami Studio. So just real quick to play what we just made, this is a great asset to have, right? We've got this video that explains so many more questions than a flat mock-up would, right? If we had just given a couple of JPEGs of this, there would be so many questions. How does a drawer move? What happens when you tap someone? And now we have this all explained very succinctly in one deliverable. So that's like it's a really great part of prototyping is to have this, and there's no questions. How many people have had like a bad miscommunication between design and engineering, right? You design something, it doesn't come out exactly as you wanted it, or you get a file and you don't know how to build it. Prototypes make this painless, right? It eliminates these really, really messy handoffs that aren't fun for anyone. Right, Kat?
Yeah, no, bad handoffs absolutely suck, especially if you're that dog. And prototyping really helps us at Facebook make sure that this is a smooth process.
Yeah.
Cool, so we have this great prototype. We've answered all the questions about design. It feels like our job might be done, right?
Yeah, we've designed everything. There's nothing left to do, right?
Wrong. There's still an important testing phase.
Right.
And we have this prototype. So that means that we can start getting some initial feedback and see how we're doing against our original goal of getting more people to tag versus just writing in names. And at Facebook, that means that we could go back to the research phase of this or the design phase and iterate for days or weeks.
Sometimes even start over.
Or we start over. And it just really depends on the quality of the product that you have, the feedback that you've been getting, and every feature is different.
Yeah. But I think for the sake of this presentation, we'll just pretend that we hit a home run and we got everything right. So the next step to do is to ship it. And shipping at Facebook is a term we use for when we feel really confident that the solution we've made is ready for the rest of the world to use. And this is an awesome time. It's usually the end of months and months of work, so we're all celebrating our success responsibly. And it's a great moment, and everyone's super stoked, and it's just an awesome time.
Right, but celebrate quickly, because very soon you'll be right back to one of these steps. Because as you can see, the design process isn't linear, it's circular. And really, it ends when you stop innovating.
Definitely. So thank you all for coming. We'd love to take some questions if you have any. But I hope that you've taken away some tips or tricks that will help you work better with your team, and you have a better understanding of the design process. And more than anything, I think we'd love to hear that you're making the relationship between design and engineering on your teams a lot better.
Yeah, because there's nothing better than when design and engineering are in sync.
So there's some microphones in the back. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could use the mic so that we could have you recorded for people watching at home.
So, any questions? Do you want to know where we got our gifts from? They're all from the internet.
Don't tell our lawyers that.
If you could just walk up to the microphones if you have questions, that'd be great. I think we've got one. So yeah, we'll go right there. Sure.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
All right. So the Origami Studio, the release date said later this year. Can we have it sooner?
I will let the team know that you want it quickly. Yeah.
There's a happy hour later today if you're going with the Origami team. Maybe if you get them drunk.
Yeah. Question over there.
Hey, thanks. I've got two questions. So
Sure.
one is it going to be easier to export video with Origami Studio? And the other one is it going to be easier to share? Like, can we generate URLs so we can do remote usability testing?
Yeah, I think that that's something we're thinking about a lot. Obviously, it's really important to the process. I'm not sure if there's anything we can say about any of those things right now, but I know that they're things that we think about on a daily basis. Personally, though, as far as video goes, I usually just use QuickTime, and I make a little screen cap, and that's pretty good for what we need. So, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Are you trying to unify design language between all the different platforms that you're on? It seems like it's going in that direction, and if so, what are you calling it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's important to have an experience that feels cohesive, right? But also respect the platforms that you're on, right? An Android app should feel like an Android app. An iOS app should feel like an iOS app because that's what the users on that platform are used to. So I don't know if there's any particular like across the board unification that we want. Obviously, we want Facebook to feel consistent on the platform it's on, but I don't think we're trying too much to like make it feel the same everywhere. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
I'm Felipe, I'm from ClassPass, and I'm curious if the former Quartz Composer patches are working or will work with...
Yeah, I'm not personally sure on that, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to be pretty much feature complete compared to each other, but definitely more to come on that once we get more closer to announcing it. Yeah. Sure.
Hello, English is not my native language, but I'll try.
Yes, perfect.
I work in a Russian company. We have a lot of designers, and we have an issue about syncing the components. What about you? How do you sync them and make up to date?
Yeah, so we've tried, there's two different ways really that all of our components became unified. It's been a 10-year process really, and now we're at a point where we've named everything like really well, and so our components in our sketch files are named exactly how you'll see them in the code base, and that actually really helps. But really, it started like with a bunch of designers who were really passionate about unifying this, and they started just kind of collecting pieces together. And now we've kind of structured it the other way, where we have an actual team dedicated at the top, like sort of distilling that information and then making sure all of the designers know from the top. So I think depending on the size of your company, you might want to start from the bottom up, where like some designers just take it upon themselves really and organize kind of the main UI components of your app or your company, and then until you get to a point where you can actually have a dedicated team, because really it has taken 10 years, and now we finally have this dedicated team, and it's great, but you know, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. have a question over there?
Yeah, I see that you guys use Sketch. How do you work it within a team? I think it's really hard to have multiple people work in the same sketch file. How do you handle that?
You probably have some good experience with that, right, Kat?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question. How do you
handle sketch files in a team?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we are diligent about our Dropbox files. We make sure that what we're working on now is local, and everything that we are okay with possibly getting overridden is in our Dropbox. But we make sure that we're always consistently updating at the end of the day or something into the Dropbox so that everyone is up to date with the latest versions. I think accidents do happen even at a company like Facebook. So like we've had entire folders disappear because we're so transparent. We want everyone to have access to each other's files. So it really is just making sure that you have kind of your own versions that are like the newest, and then something that you're like okay with maybe losing.
Yeah, I don't think we've quite nailed it 100% yet though.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
still
cool,
working
thank
on it. Yeah.
Hi, your demos were completely visual. I was wondering if it also comes with features so you could test like the voice with the picture thing they were talking about earlier. I'm blanking on its name. But accessibility features, how are they implemented into your app, and how can we use them?
You have any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, it's tough. I think for the purpose of the demo, right, we kind of skipped some things. Accessibility is super important.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw recently, but we just released this awesome thing that uses AI to kind of generate descriptive text for images, which is really cool. But yeah, it's just something that you kind of had to think about the whole way through. And we definitely did skip over it in this because it was just for the demo's sake. But
and we do have a team that works on plugins internally so that we can test real data in our origami files. So when I made that grid, typically what we would do is actually pull in real user names and faces to make sure that everything doesn't break when you use real information. So I think you can find a lot of plugins out there, and like the origami community is really great. They're always innovating. So if you're looking for something specific, I think it might happen one day, or it already exists. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So today, for Sketch users, they released an update that fixed the symbols thing that was going on. That it was very buggy.
Yeah.
So this may be a little less relevant now. But I'm wondering, you use style guides and you try to use abstraction and components as much as possible. I was wondering how you deal with choosing a point where you stop, because at some point it gets very granular, and then when one thing breaks, everything breaks. I'm curious to know what you guys do about that.
Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, so I think, so your question basically was how do you know when to stop granularizing components, right?
Yeah.
I think you just it takes time to figure it out, right? I don't know if our interface guidelines are quite as granular as the one Kat did for this demo, but you're right. When you get too specific, you create too much friction. So I think it really just depends on what you're working on and what it is. And I think you'll start to feel man, this sucks because it's I have to use this thing here. And then maybe that's a time to step back and just say maybe we shouldn't be so strict. But yeah, it's not perfect. I don't think even we're 100% sure in any of this. And I don't think anyone is. You're still, this web design thing is still somewhat new, especially when it comes to product design. So we're still constantly changing and trying new things and seeing what works for us.
yeah, and when I first started, I actually thought maybe this the Facebook interface guidelines would somehow dampen my creativity, but it really does help you just dive into the core problems. And when you work on a project, because inevitably you will work on a product where you have to design a new component, it just doesn't exist. It's a super open environment. We sit down with the team, we talk about them, we tell them what our needs are, and they tell us, well, we don't have this, but maybe if you can make it apply to a couple of teams, we can integrate it into the part of the system. So we're trying not to create one-off solutions. We really want to make sure that everything that we create is intentional and will help the entire ecosystem of our app.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, last question.
I wonder if you guys have some kind of methodology like Scrum, sprints, or Kanban to make use of better time management.
Yeah, I think honestly this is one of my favorite parts about working at Facebook is that there's very few very prescribed this is the way we do things. So some teams use sprints, some teams do Scrum. It just really depends on the team and who you're working with and kind of what works best for all of you. So we don't have any. There's no one dictating you must do it this way and this way and this way. We every team is a little different and works a little differently. Do you have any perspective on that from your team, Kat?
My perspective is that I've been on 3 teams and they've all been entirely different. So I think that the best part about Facebook is that as a team, you kind of function a little bit like a startup. So you develop the culture around, like, are we doing scrums? Are we doing 1-week sprints, 4-week sprints? And then it's sort of the new team that you join, you're just learning how to be part of a new company, really.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. I hope you have a great F8.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for coming to F8. Thanks for sitting around for the design sessions. It's been awesome. We'll see you next year. And hopefully we'll see some of you tonight at the Design Tools happy hour. Have a safe travels wherever you're going, and see you next year.